This session will explore how air freight is shaping modern logistics, meeting the demands of speed, efficiency, and adaptability. From e-commerce to high-value cargo, air freight is redefining logistics for a global marketplace. Moderating this session is Mr. Chaminda Pereira, Head of Cargo at Sri Lankan Airlines. With his deep expertise in air cargo, operations and strategic planning, Mr. Pereira is ideally positioned to guide us in this discussion. Dear moderator, please come on stage. With that, I also kindly request the speakers to join us on stage as I call out their name. Our distinguished panelists include Mr. Sanjay Samarasinghe, Country Manager at Aramex Freight Corporation. Mr. Channa Gunawardena, Director or CEO of Expologics. Mr. Miran Piris, Senior General Manager, Global Air Procurement Expolanca. Mr. Sujan Malavena, Speedmark Transportation's Commercial Director. Over to you, moderator.
It is indeed great pleasure that to talk to an audience that I think the majority is from the maritime segment. But these four gentlemen are mostly air freight. So I think the conversation or discussion that we can give a fruitful discussion and takeaway to everybody here seated here. So before that, I'll get a bit of introduction about the panelists. Mr. Channa Gunawardena, from the chairman of Sri Lanka Freight Forwarders Association, and also director of CEO of Expologics Sri Lanka, and Mr. Sanjay Samarasinghe, Country Manager Director Aramex Sri Lanka, and Mr. Miran Piris, Global Air Freight, General Manager Global Air Freight, EFL, and Mr. Sujan Malavena, Commercial Director of Speedmark Transportation Lanka. So I'm sure that you get a gist of the panelists who has experience, vast knowledge of experience in the industry that will give a fruitful discussion for next 80 to 90 minutes. So moving on, we'll have this discussion is actually broken down into three areas. One is that we are talking about the general hub concepts, and then moving to the next segment is moving to e-commerce and also the courier side of the business. And lastly, one of the most important segments that we all are talking about, SIA hub concept on Sri Lanka. So those are the three areas, and then at the last 10 minutes that we will have a Q&A where audience will have opportunity of talking to or maybe posing questions to the panelists. So starting off with Channa, globalization has made the entire world an open economy. Swift connectivity to link global markets is required. How does air cargo contribute to global economic growth and international trade? To start, what makes air cargo such a crucial part of global supply chain? Next, is there any significant support from air cargo to the economy and the trade?
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I will first try and probably take you back 25 years to the past. Right? I know maybe Sujan does not belong to that generation, maybe some of us are. So when I started air freight. And if I draw parallels to what we do right now, so go back 25 years, if you look at the commodity-wise, you have the pharmaceuticals, the perishable stuff, high-value items, all predominantly went by air. Now, if you come back to the current context and look at the last decade or so, and of course, even those days before coming to the current situation, things like apparels, traditional goods were shipped by air freight based on the demand. So if there are urgent shipments, the ship. So even those days, the contribution to the economy, to the global trade was massive in terms of air freight. Of course, it was not visible because of the fact that initial mode of preference is always ocean freight. We did have sea air also those days, but not to the extent of what it happens right now. So come back to the current context, and if you go back 10 years, apart from those commodities, e-commerce have come into prominence. Shami, I think you'll allow me to talk about e-commerce because it has a connection, connection even right now. So e-commerce has come into prominence. Now, if you look at the current situation, 20% of the global retail, 20%, which is about $4 trillion US, is on e-commerce, right? So now this is, you're talking about e-commerce, which is going to double. This figure, a lot of experts say it will double by 2035. Now, if you look at that 20%, 80% of that trade, of this global retail business, the mode is air freight, right? So that's the contribution air freight make to the global retail business. So I think, Shamida, I think I have answered both questions together. Yeah. That's the prominence. And if you look at the support to the economy and trade, right, it is undoubtedly yes, right? Now, again, if you look at, say, maybe even 15 years ago, we haven't had so many disruptions, right? Now, you look at the current situation. We had COVID, then we had port closures, then ocean gateways were not accessible, right? And we had a ship also banging a vessel, banging a bridge, which we never even heard of those days. Luckily, I mean, that had not had a great impact on the trade. But those are the disruptions. So when there's a disruption, you look for alternates, right? So you think beyond the ocean freight, so there you have air freight. So if not for air freight, especially during the pandemic, we all saw how swiftly, from PPE to pharmaceuticals to vaccines to, how it had, I mean, invariably it had contributed to the sustaining of the global economy. So I think, yes, so it may
I think adding to what Chana said, that air freight came in support of when the world came to a standstill in 2020, that the vaccines were the most, the highest, or rather sought after commodity that was everybody is talking about, and there was so much of ambiguity in terms of storage, in terms of carriage. So airlines came in support of that, and also the PPEs, the transportation of PPEs from different parts of the world to the most desired or demanding areas. So I think, as Chana very rightly said, I just chipped into that. The air freight had made a significant role, especially during the pandemic. Actually, even in the airlines itself, that had the acceptance that this is a proper revenue generator and this is a proper business for the company itself. Any company, I'm talking about any airline. So that was one thing. Having said that, especially in the last 4 years, that airlines were really struggling. Actually, air cargo supported the companies to keep their heads above the water. So that is one thing that air freight industry did for the airlines and transportation companies. So, yeah, taking from Channa, that I would move to Sujan. So as I said, we are going to talk about global hubs. Sujan, global hubs does not operate in isolation. How do global air cargo hubs contribute to the economies of their surrounding regions? I'm sure that we have a couple of hubs around us. If you talk about Dubai or Singapore, or even now India is also looking for. India is talking about 10 million tons of cargo by 2030. So India, looking at it as the geographical size of the country, having a global hub inside India itself, we don't know whether it can be really challenging. But Sri Lanka has a better opportunity of getting the crumbs coming out of India. Over to you, Sujan.
Thanks, Chaminda, and happy to be part of this forum. As a global hub, Sri Lanka has developed as a new emerging hub. Obviously, the traditional hubs has always been Singapore or Hong Kong or Dubai. And over a period of time, because of its geographical location, Sri Lanka has been developing as a transshipment hub and also a very key port, an airport, in terms of cargo movement, right? Now, to answer your question, does a hub develop the regional economies? Yes, it does. To start off with, it creates both indirect and direct employment in terms of freight forwarding, logistics solution providers, in terms of ground handling agents, in terms of supply chain management solution providers. So yes, there is an improvement on a global scale on a region with the development of a hub. And with that, there will also be developments of logistics services and logistics solutions, warehousing and integrated solutions around the region within that hub. Apart from that, a hub also leads to economic diversification. If you see, Sri Lanka has always been a tea, rubber, coconut, ready-made garments hub, right? With it emerging as a hub, you get other products that Sri Lanka hasn't tapped into for economic growth in that area. For example, Sri Lanka has a very vibrant furniture manufacturing industry, which exports are not really significant enough, right? Whereas the majority of that has gone to Vietnam, and that has developed because of the Singapore and Hong Kong developing as a regional hub. So not only Sri Lanka is relevant to the Indian, the Bangladeshi, the Nepal, and also the Pakistan origin for development of those industries, right? And in terms of revenue generation also, a hub creates, with the increased business activity of logistic solution providers, warehousing, ocean freight, air freight, and also rail freight and road freight, the government of Sri Lanka stands to gain in terms of tax revenue. So as Sri Lanka grows as a hub, there's more money to be made in government revenue. And Sri Lanka government needs the revenue, right? And then also, I think having multiple hubs, Sri Lanka is not exactly new, but new in comparison to a Singapore or a Hong Kong or a Dubai. This also creates supply chain resilience. We have had a pandemic, we've had the Red Sea crisis, where Sri Lanka emerged as one of the most busiest ports during that period, and there was a 25% increase in volumes across the ports, which few media channels did catch, but not many of them did promote it. So Sri Lanka is definitely a hub, and also it helps develop other regional hubs as well.
So do you think that connecting China to Africa, connecting India to Africa, or maybe Africa to China, is that something in the equation that we can think about? Because some have already captured certain markets. So Dubai has captured east to west, and Singapore and Hong Kong has captured towards via Pacific to US, Canada. So is there anything, do you think, I mean, no, this is a very open question to anybody. Is there anybody that can think of that, where we really get our niche? Sanjay, yeah.
Yeah, Chaminda, that's a good question. I'd like to point out a couple of things. Yes, Africa is a market that we should be looking into. It's a growing market, and there's, like you said, no one's really tapped into that market when it comes to the hub and spoke model as well. But also we have to keep in mind the traditional markets that you said, the hubs, Singapore, Hong Kong, Dubai. These hubs also are now providing opportunities to Sri Lanka if you're looking at it the right way, because they're becoming quite expensive, right? Especially when you look at the e-commerce landscape, you're constantly being crunched for cost, right? In that sort of environment, I think Sri Lanka again becomes very attractive if we put the right proposition forward. So when I say that, I actually don't mean this being put to a responsibility on the government side, whilst they do have on a policy level. The responsibility also falls on private sector, such as ourselves, the airlines and the other players, to really go out there in the market and sell Sri Lanka as the future. I think over the last few days we've been talking about a lot of maritime and freight related subjects. These are certainly the past and the present, but the future is more a mix. Supply chains are becoming more resilient, you're expected to be more agile, so you're going to have to find solutions that are mixed and matched, and sea to air, sea to freight to express. So in this sort of environment, I'd say we are in the right place, and also for some reason, fortunately, I think we are also again in the right time to pitch ourselves to the region and the world as a hub, and with those unique propositions as an advantage as well.
Just to add on to that as well, Sri Lanka, unlike the other origins, is also a growing regional IT hub. And with the growth in trade, you get the development in the IT sector, growing the supply chain management systems, right? So in order to capture African origins and all the other origins that you mentioned, our IT field in coordination with the supply chain management companies are at a real great advantage because we have a homegrown solution within the country. So unlike the other origins have. So we have a great knowledge pool here which we need to tap into as the private sector.
Thanks, Sujan and Sanjay. So I think every crisis has an opportunity. So airlines always had this opportunity. We talk about pandemic, you talk about Red Sea crisis, so many crises that have gone through. Getting to my next discussion point to Miran, certain crises that we experience, such as the Red Sea crisis, have tested the handling capacity of the hubs. And how do capacity constraints at major hubs impact the flow of global air cargo?
Yeah, thanks, Chami. So before I get into the answer of how capacity congestion made the global air freight demand to surge, it's better to get to know the background, how capacity got congested. So Red Sea crisis, yes, it's partially responsible for the surge that we saw in year 2024 for air freight cluster. So the Red Sea crisis, again, Red Sea is, as we know, it's an important corridor which contributes to around 12 to 15% of global trade. And if we go back to the history, I believe in October 2023, to be precise, on 19th of October, the vessels were attacked, and then this made the operators to find a safe routing, and where they had to go around Cape of Good Hope. It's a safe routing, but then it's an expensive path. Then eventually the rerouting made a substantial increase in lead time. If you take a shipment from Asia into Europe, Generally, the transit is around 19 days, but due to the crisis, it got extended to 31 days. So minimum, we're looking at 14 days additional transit time. So this made the buyers to switch from ocean to air, and there you go, the congestion started. And I believe even the congestion, it happened in several phases. First, the customers started using the multimodal solution CAR, and as my fellow speakers mentioned, we saw transshipments increasing from Colombo, from Singapore, and from Dubai. So that was the first resolution which was adopted by our customers. Secondly, the crisis went on, it didn't stop. I believe halfway through the year, or probably by end of Q1, we saw customers completely switching from ocean to air. So that again increased the demand for air freight. It didn't stop there. We saw even big players in the market operating charters. So there you go. You can see how the volume for air freight built up, and then it started adding pressure on the capacity, the prices went up. So this is one side of the story, the Red Sea crisis. Then, like Channa said, e-commerce. It's a huge market where we had significant growth over the last 2 decades, I would say. So if you go by the facts, for year 2024, e-commerce is going to contribute $8 trillion. That's the projection. And also it's linked by approximately 20% to the global air freight volume. So we can't forget e-commerce. Even we don't know what they're shipping, but we can't forget them because, you know, it's that they're doing a massive contribution to the trade. So we had the Red Sea crisis, then we have e-commerce, and then we also have the regular air freight which is moving in the global markets. So we put these three together. There we saw the boom, and again, I believe the global air freight volumes had increased by 8.4% based on the last report published by IATA. It had a 8.4% year-on-year growth. So coming back to Chami's question, so this is the background. So what are the implications of this situation towards global air freight? I believe there are 2 key implications. Number one would be the service delivery gets affected. Or in simple language, your cargo won't be flying as booked, or you're going to see extended transit times. Because the moment the movements increase, the hubs gets affected, and your screening backlogs get started. Then also you're going to have internal transportation systems getting strained, so that it creates a congestion. And if you're not lucky enough to stop it within 2 or 3 weeks, if it lasts for like 4 weeks, then you will see embargoes are being announced by the carriers. So again, the ripple effect would be the end consumer will be seeing extended, prolonged transit times, and you're going to see long dwell times in hubs. So that's one implication. And probably, customers are going to ask from us, okay, am I getting the value for money for using air freight? So that's one implication on the service delivery side. And the second implication would be the cost. So this year we saw the rates were at an elevated level. If you go back to beginning of this year, the rates from Southeast Asia to US was around 2 to 250. That's where it started. And where are we now? It climbed up to the level of $8. So that's the impact. And rates are going to stay at elevated levels. For it to fall, again, it will be subject to the macro environment factors. So if I am to recap, it could be the Red Sea crisis, or it could be a volcanic eruption, or it could be another global pandemic. Of course, we don't want to have another COVID. But then again, the global air freight is going to get affected in terms of high price volatility is going to be there, capacity is going to get congested, and also it's going to leave a question mark on service delivery and the transit times. That's the input.
Thanks, Miran. So we are going to, actually we have focused on few buzzwords like sustainability, e-commerce and stuff like that. So sustainability, have we really taken serious about sustainable development goals? As an industry, is air freight, I'm not talking about only airline side, I'm talking about everybody, and also other parts of the industry. Airline industry is contributing just less than 3% to emissions, but since airline industry is in a glamorous area, that is being like seen as a big sin that somebody is doing. But anyway, airline industry has taken very serious about it, about the 2050 SDG. But there's quite a lot to happen, quite a lot of sustainable aviation fuel and stuff like this is going to happen, to take place. Otherwise, I mean, it will be not easy to attain those goals. So Sanjay, getting at you, have air cargo really taken steps towards sustainability? Does it have a bigger role to play?
Thank you, Chamin. I think this is a question I should be asking you, isn't it?
I'm part of it.
Well, like you said, in our part of the world, sustainability is, I think, a little bit more than a buzzword now, in the last few years especially. But let me take it in a global context first. Like you mentioned, the targets that are set for 2050 are quite aggressive by IATA, right? Whether we can achieve it or not, it's questionable looking at the traction right now unless there's a major change in how we generate energy or power or fuel. But 50% reduction on the 2005 numbers, I think whilst we are heading towards that direction, whether we'll attain it or not, it becomes a question mark, right? Coming from the developing world, being in Sri Lanka and in the region, I'd say at a policy level, governments and both the private sector, I feel, are doing the needful in our part of the world. I think the responsibility of real sustainability and how that is going to achieve that target in 2050 really depends on the developing world for me, and how they will support our initiatives in going green, especially when it comes to generating power, green power. In a Sri Lankan context, if I look at it, like I said, national policy of sustainability was recently drawn up, drafted and passed, which is a very good sign for the country. I see a lot of players in the logistics sector. If I take the whole sector as a whole without just focusing on the air freight, is one of the top 3 most pollutant industries in the world, right? So yes, air freight does constitute, or airlines do constitute a smaller portion of it. But looking at the whole thing, in Sri Lanka, whilst at a policy level we'll set up, at a private sector level, the legwork is being done. I think the real shortcoming for us is how do we generate green power, right? Where does the investment for that come in, both in terms of financial investment and also technical investment? Recently, we've seen a large regional player invest in wind power, but that project is up in the air, if I'm not mistaken now. So for Sri Lanka, it's going to be on how fast we can get up with the rest of the guys in the region, namely Singapore, China, Hong Kong, in generating sustainable energy. And once we get to that point, I think the rest of it, we might even overtake the developing world. Because the level of understanding that we have in a country like Sri Lanka and the love we have for nature, it comes naturally, right? So that's on a global level and a local level. But if you look at it on what can we do, so we are looking at optimization, right? Optimization of how the line haul works, or how your routing works. The pandemic and the last 2 years and the boom of e-commerce has also slightly changed how the buying market operates. So there's a lot of nearshoring happening as well. So that's also part of the sustainability plan. So instead of maybe bringing something down from China to the US, you can bring it closer to you, and then that also contributes to a more sustainable supply chain. When it comes to the private sector, it becomes, for example, if you take Aramex, Aramex's goal is by 2030 for us to be at net zero, right? And to get to that point, our standard is every year, every country needs to add 10% more green initiatives onto their station. So if you're using 10 electric vehicles, then you've got to increase that by 10% at a minimum level. So as a group, we have a large focus on how we operate sustainably. We have invested heavily in drone technology to explore how we can use that for middle mile or short distance line haul as well. So that would then again cut down the usage of fuel, traditional fuel. We are also looking at using biofuel in a lot of places, in looking at how can we keep the environment clean and sustainable as well. So quite a few things that can be done. Quite a few things are being done on the ground right now, whether it's private sector or the government. I think what we need to see more of is how does the developed world now support what we are doing? Because, I mean, they have to take the responsibility of being the biggest polluters when they were developing and in the industrialization process. So now that the developing world is also developing, how do you now support us with those technological skills and also the funding to go green? That's what I think.
Thanks, Sanjay. Am I audible? Am I audible? Yeah. Before moving to the next set of discussion points, that I just wanted to give a little bit of knowledge about the air freight industry. That last 9 straight months that the airline industry was on double-digit growth in terms of demand. In terms of capacity, that capacity has grown about 6% last 12 weeks. What I'm saying, 12 months. So that is something that significant to the air freight industry. Okay, next moving to the next segment of discussion points, mainly on the e-commerce. I will not leave Sanjay go. Your next point, Sanjay, is everyone understood the convenience and importance of e-commerce during the pandemic period. How has the surge in e-commerce sales influenced global air cargo demand and volumes? I know we spoke partly about it here and there, but you're an expert in the industry, so I'm leaving it to you, Sanjay.
Thanks, Amit. I mean, good question. Very pertinent for where we are today in Sri Lanka as well. E-commerce is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. If anything, it's going to keep growing exponentially as Asia also starts catching up with e-commerce trends, right? If you look at the whole overall market, it is $8 trillion, yes. But let's look at it in a slightly smaller way. In the India subcontinent region, it constitutes to about $8 billion. So the pandemic made e-commerce more visible to everyone. The consumer got more exposed to it because they were stuck at home. They couldn't go out. They still needed their stuff, their food, their clothes. So that kind of put a spotlight on e-commerce. After the pandemic, you saw a kind of realignment. The trend kind of backed down a little bit, but now it's stabilized again, right? So you're going to start seeing exponential growth again on this as we go through the years, in the coming years. And it becomes important to understand what drives that, right? Is it just the fact that people want to have a more convenience? Is it price? Is it location, like the ability to access things? So by understanding that, I think it's easier for a country like Sri Lanka to cater to that market. Right now, we are not getting any portion of this e-commerce business other than the business that's coming into the country. But there is certainly a lot of business available in the region if we can really open up transshipments in Sri Lanka. Now, we often discuss Sri Lanka being a transshipment hub. It is, but it's only for freight. Right? It's not for express cargo, it's not for e-commerce. So we need to really start looking at how does the policy framework support that? How does the ground facilities support that and enable that? And what can we do to speed that up? Because right now, if you look at the market, you have big players, traditionally big players like Amazon, new big players like Alibaba, who are hunting regional hubs around this area. And unfortunately, because of non-recognition of the express industry or that e-commerce industry in Sri Lanka, we are kind of missing out. Recently, a very big player in the express industry made a very large investment, close to $400 million in Malaysia to enable e-commerce business, right? So we are going to miss out if we don't start looking at it. At Aramex, we take the forefront in trying to educate the Sri Lankan public and different stakeholders of the importance of this. You know this, Chaminda, we've been working with you for the last 3 years to get the transshipment hub up and running at the airport. But it becomes frustrating. Yeah, it becomes frustrating because due to the lack of understanding at stakeholder level, due to a lack of understanding at private sector level, in the legacy type of freight businesses, this becomes a challenge to get up and running. You and I know this very well, right? So that's one aspect of it, the understanding and the knowledge. We would take the responsibility, the private sector takes the responsibility to educate people. While at a policy level, there needs to be more expertise in what's happening around us, what's happening in India. Like you said, India is pitching now for that e-commerce business. Indonesia is pitching. Think about this. A country like Indonesia is pitching to be a hub for Asia, while a country like Sri Lanka, which has for 3,000 years almost been a hub to the world, is missing out. So there's quite a bit of work to be done on the ground, and it's great to have people like Chaminda who's supporting and understanding, but we need more people, I think, to really capture and grow e-commerce in Sri Lanka and become a hub for e-commerce in the region as well.
Yeah, Sanjay, I think to add to what you said, that our stake here is just about 10 to 15%, I would say. I mean, the rest is the policy. So the policy and the conducive environments creating such environment is actually private, or let's say individual organizations like us is difficult. So I think if there are policymakers, anybody here, that this is a very good take home, that this is discussed here at a forum like this, that we really need to be a courier hub, and that's something that we should not miss, because I think Sanjay very rightly said about the Shein to Alibaba to you name it, Temu. I mean, they might need fulfillment centers here. I mean, which we don't have anything. Sanjay, correct me if I'm wrong.
Very correct. I mean, we had a big player, Amazon, come into the country about 3 years back, or 4 years back, exploring that hub-spoke mechanism out of Sri Lanka and fulfillment out of Sri Lanka for the region. But unfortunately, again, because the policy framework was not there or was more towards the freight industry. I mean, we can look at it with what's happening right now on the ground with the RC Hub coming in. which is a system that we use for data and transfer to customs, stakeholders, the airline. Now RC Hub doesn't have the facility or the plugin that works for courier. Everybody's forgotten about including that. So whilst it has all the freight-related plugins, it doesn't have the Express plugin. So again, it's a non-understanding. So when we go for discussions with stakeholders in regards to recreating these policies, again, most of the time we are spoken to in freight language, air freight language, which it's not the same thing. It's close, but it's not. So I think collectively there is work to be done here to really capture the e-commerce market. We still have a little bit of time, but not too much, because like I said, Malaysia has already got its foot in there. Indonesia is pitching for this, especially at Bali, because they have a lot of connectivity with the tourism going in. But for me, always, Sri Lanka has been the key, not just for the region, but for the world, if you're looking at an e-commerce hub, especially because we've got a airline that flies to so many destinations back and forth, which gives us another unique advantage when it comes to doing e-commerce transshipment. And also we have one of the busiest ports in the world, which if we were to look at it in a dynamic way, in a future-proof way, we could create more agile solutions that are, for example, sea to air, but sea to express air. We could use rail from the ports to the airport. We could be more efficient. If you take the airport, for example, to enable more e-commerce. Right now, we understand that when we send a truck in with goods, you need that 2 feet space in between your trucks. So which e-commerce companies, I mean, if you look at how Alibaba fills up its trucks, they are not going to leave 2 feet space for someone to walk through there and, physically check. Why not have an X-ray machine? So there's a lot of things we can do on the ground. They are not rocket science stuff, but it has to be done, and it has to be done really fast. We've started a project as a company 3 years ago, and we hope that at least in the next year that we will be able to fulfill this dream.
So Sujan, moving to you, the purchasing patterns have changed and the needs requires to be satisfied at a rapid pace. How does the new generation's preference for fast, affordable delivery impact air cargo and logistic operations? Get the other one.
Thanks, Jamal. Yeah, I think the growth of using mobile telecommunication applications has had a rapid growth in terms of buyers having immediate access to the products that they want, right? And this trend is now evolved not only to new products, but also reused products, which is now a growing trend in the European Union, where normally what we would do is if we want a clothing item once or twice, we would then tend to discard it. But now it is a growing business where even reusable clothing items are resold on platforms. So it's a twofold thing on that growth.
And also the returns, I think.
On the returns, yes. So it comes back to sustainability, where the newer generations are not looking at wastage. The pressure on reusing goods, being more sustainable is a massive drive. And it's not just a buzzword anymore. If you take back, if you go back a few years, everybody wanted to be sustainable if it was cheap. But now it's not the case. Even and there's a massive push from even the customers and the clients for you to be sustainable. I think the drawback in terms of sustainability is that even if you take pallets, the sustainable pallets are more expensive than heat-treated wooden pallets, forcing certain decisions to be made. And if you're a very cost-conscious customer, you tend to take the cheap option. But I think now, with the knowledge being involved, people are moving towards sustainability. So coming back to in terms of how we deal with the rapid demand, first off is that there will be obviously air cargo and express shipping as a massive growth in terms of consolidation. where we see many of the freight forwarders and air cargo providers consolidating shipments rather than doing single shipments to speed to market, right? And we also see a rapid growth in tracking and tracing in terms of IT systems, in terms of logistics providers being integrated into airlines in order to track and trace their shipments so that we can get speed to market, and everybody wants to know where their shipment is. Everybody wants to sit at their table and look at their phone and be like, now it's at the transshipment hub, now it's been cleared. So that data needs to be available, and if you are not going to evolve as a provider, you cannot sustain in this market, right? And in terms of capacity, I feel that this year specifically, traditionally there's always been 2 peaks a year. But this year has been a very unusual year where we've seen, as our previous panelist said, we've seen a steady good 10 months of high demand of air freight. Even coming down to today is Black Friday. And if you go back 1 month from today, there was a rapid demand in terms of express courier and also air freight, right? So speed to market, demand planning, all of that has a play in this. And also I think managing consumer expectations. I think people in the industry have come to understand that they don't want to wait for their products anymore. Previously, we were so used to waiting for our products till it come, but now everything has to be same day or next day delivery, right? The tagline is order before 10 p.m. today, delivery after 10 a.m. tomorrow, right? So I think majority of the people are used to that trend, and that's an irreversible trend. And because of that, there's a massive pressure in terms of logistics providers to do that in a fast-paced manner, but also in a sustainable manner. Because you can see a lot of people are using drone logistics now, e-bikes, which is a growing trend, and also EV vehicles, right? So I think that is here to stay, but I also feel that the consumer market also needs to be understanding of that, and they should be able to take that responsibility that the change starts with me rather than wait with somebody else to do it and let's just follow that. So yeah.
Thanks, Sujan. So moving to Chanda, wide array of commodities are transported through e-commerce. How do air cargo security regulations impact e-commerce shipments, especially for smaller or high-value packages?
Thanks, Chami. So before we get into the e-commerce part of it, I would like to focus on the area of cargo security. First, starting from who gets involved, who set these regulations. So there are 3 main parties involved in setting the regulation for air cargo industry, which is the IATA, World Customs Organization, and the ICAO, which is International Civil Aviation Organization. So pausing there, I would like to go back to the first question, Chami, what you asked, and my answer was that out of the 20%, out of the retail business, 20% happens through e-commerce, and of that e-commerce, 80% of the shipments are moved by air freight. Now that business is going to get double by 2035, most of the people say. So that means the security aspect even going to be much more stringent in time to come. The scrutiny in terms of physical security and in terms of documents. Now getting back to the security regulations. So it's set by those 3 organizations. Initially it was on the side of cargo receival, where we had the ACI regulation, that is Advanced Cargo Information, which are submitted, data and documents are submitted prior to the arrival of the shipment at destination. That is the first layer. Come 2019, PLACI regime schemes, right? That is preloading advanced cargo information. That means you're supposed to declare a lot of information prior to the loading of cargo at the origin. So now we have 2 layers. ACI layer, which talks of arrival, Then you have the Placid regimes, which the regimes changes from destination area to area. So you have the Placid regime, we talk of the preloading aspect of it. Now, one thing common to all of these is that it talks of data and data submissions. So what can you do with data, right? So you can do predictive analysis. I'm sure nowadays you have machine learning and AI involved in this. You can predict and you can gauge risk and all of that. Now we are in the era of e-commerce. Now, predicting situation based on the data, you can do that for commercial shipment which is moved by air because you have the known shippers, you have known places, you have known origins, and you have AI-enabled analysis which can help you on continuous shipments. Now you are in the e-commerce era. E-commerce, what happens is you have hundreds and thousands of small shipments which are consolidated. You don't really see a pattern even if you use AI or whatever it is. Well, you can do predictive analysis to a greater level, but not to the level of where you can relax in terms of security. So what happens is that in e-commerce era, where now we are talking about e-commerce growing and doubling, these security measures in terms of having visibility for documents will not suffice because you have unknown shippers. So the pressure, there will be a lot of pressure on e-commerce shipment because there will be a lot of physical scrutiny of shipments. And there will be a lot of information required in terms of additional paperwork. So that I see as a challenge, and I really don't know, Shami, maybe Sanjay can answer that question better in what's in store for us in coming years.
And even on safety side, as an operator, that we also face this because there's quite a lot of lithium-ion batteries moving. Lithium-ion is still a restrictive product, a commodity that you can't carry. And that is something actually really hindering the process of doing our processes. And there's a safety issue also. So the e-commerce that, where it is heading is like really have to be regulated. That's what we as an operator think.
Very true. Even if you look at the recent implementation of ACAs in the freight industry, right? It talks of 7+1 submissions. So you have the usual shipper consignee commodity description and all that, and you have to declare the house bill number also.
Yeah.
Now, like that, there are regimes coming up in Canada, actually about 6 or 7, which again talks of documents. But as you said, physical aspect of it, the lithium batteries are involved in a lot of things which are being shipped. So I'm sure definitely there will be a challenge for e-commerce.
Chan and Chamit, if I can just touch on the security aspect, I think it's very important that we understand today is not a day and age where one can put something like security to how we used to do it before, to just the agencies or the border control to handle it. It's everybody's collective responsibility in this age of e-commerce. I can tell you what us as a company does to ensure security. So for example, when it comes to lithium-ion batteries, we make sure that it's from a reliable supplier. The shipper has the documentation that has the MSDSs, it's up to date, right? Then we have the required skill set with the people who are qualified and trained to handle this when it comes to packing, when it comes to taking it out of the shipment or putting it onto the airline. Then we also have to support the border agencies on how to understand how to control these things, right? When it comes to drugs, do we have scanners in place? When it comes to explosives, do we have scanners in place? In the last two things, we don't have a lot of these facilities. So again, it comes down to something that we have to do together. The stakeholders at a policy or government level and the private sector need to come together with the operators such as the airlines and see what can we do to make sure that at least in Sri Lanka, we are secure, and then we are encouraging more compliant and businesses that are secure. Now again, if you're looking at the e-commerce market, a player like Alibaba or Amazon are becoming highly compliant organizations. They want these checks and balances in place. They want to know that you have drug scanning equipment. They want to know that you have these people on the ground who are able to check this documentation. So they are placing responsibility on themselves, and I think it's our responsibility here sitting in Sri Lanka in the private sector also to take part of that responsibility, to have the proper documentation on our side, the proper checks and balances on our side, and also advocate for what is really required. If I go back to my last topic, I find it shocking that we have 3 checkpoints going into the airport and they're all manual. When we have a scanner gifted by the US government sitting at the port which is not being used, right? So these are the things that we need to really push and advocate for these facilities. If they're not used at the port, then let's use it at the airport. Let's be more secure. Let's ensure that our customers, who are the bigger e-commerce players, feel secure to operate out of Sri Lanka. And as a country, we are also more secure than. We are really secure. I mean, if I believe an X-ray scanner can scan a container way better than someone walking through it, right? And that also leads again into sustainability. So these points are all interconnected. And I think Aramex has taken a front foot in Sri Lanka. And in some cases, it's been a disadvantage for us, right? When you require to move a battery, for example, with us, it can take longer and it can cost a little bit more because we go through all those checks and balances. Whereas the airline still carries ones that do not have these proper checks and balances in place through other various means. So we have to come together to stop this kind of practice and make Sri Lanka more secure, the businesses more secure, and also the operators more secure.
I mean, just to add on to his point, so Channa and I are part of the Sri Lanka Logistics and Freight Forwarders Association. And it was only yesterday that Channa and myself and the team met with the Airport and Aviation Chairman and also the Civil Aviation Chairman. And we raised this concern about the scanner just collecting dust at the port. And we have requested the chairman himself to intervene so that we get that scanner to the Colombo airport. Because what we have said is that as an association, as private companies, we want the security to be at the same level. But we should get rid of manual checks and use the available technology to increase the efficiency. If you take every single truck that goes through the airport, there needs to be a 2 feet gap so that somebody can walk through. And if you take that into the number of companies that operate, imagine the amount of void space that freight forwarders and customers are paying for. So that is a cost that can be easily taken out through technology, which is what we have requested for.
Great. So, Miran, in what ways does air cargo contribute to meeting customer expectations for fast shipping, particularly during peak seasons, example like Black Friday, Thanksgiving, Valentine's Day?
Yeah, again, it's a good question. So if we look at the 12-month calendar for the air freight industries, the peak starts with the Lunar New Year. So that's the first event. Then we have the Valentine's, more of a regional event from Africa, sending flowers across the globe. Then we have the financial year-end rush, which is predominantly out of Asia. And then there's a bit of softness in the market. And then we have the high-tech guys waking up between August to October to launch their devices. And finally, we have the Thanksgiving, then Black Friday, which we have today, and then the Christmas rush. So all of these events, especially the high-tech and the retail events, are driven by strict deadlines. And the on-time performance is key. So that's where air freight comes into play, and it has a pivotal role. And you need fast shipping to meet those deadlines. The reason being, for merchandisers, if they don't have enough inventory stocked up, it's a lost opportunity for them. So they got to make sure I have enough inventory to sell out. So how does air cargo contribute? For me, I would say there are two key contributions made by the industry. First would be air cargo offers a unique product which is charters. So if you want to get a product on an exact date or on a particular time frame, charters stand out as the best option. So the industry gives that option to our customers. It comes at a price, but then if you are looking at shipping a product with a short shelf life, such as perishables, then it's the best choice because it gives good quality. To maintain the quality, and also it helps to maintain the delicacy of the product. So one contribution or a solution provided by the air cargo sector is the charters. It's a niche and a unique product. Second contribution will be, we will see on the supply side, the capacity supply side, where carriers would be deploying additional capacity. So they would be upgrading capacity on routes where there is high demand. So if you look at Valentine's, we will see from Nairobi into Amsterdam or into Liège, there will be commercial capacity being added to the market. So that again helps our customers to move the demand without any congestion. Even for that matter, if you look at high-tech, Shanghai to Chicago or Hanoi to Chicago, those routes will see an upgrade. So the customers doesn't get difficult in finding space. So I believe, Chami, those are the two contributions which air cargo does to our clientele. So charters, it's a must, and you need that product. Besides that, there is commercial capacity upgrade that takes place in the market.
Thanks, Miran. So our next segment is kind of very interesting segment for, I think, all of us in this country. We always have been talking about a hub, that air hub, air to air, sea to air. But I mean, it is just happening passively only. That what I see. My take is that have we really taken initiatives as stakeholders, and is the environment conducive? I mean, are we really competitive to Singapore, to Dubai, to elsewhere? Because India is also working on this. So that is I believe that this is a segment that we should be really focused at, but we have to go on a quick fire 20-25 minutes. So I think I'm moving to Sujan. Hybrid approaches require merging two or more modes of transportation that requires efficient communication and coordination. How can shippers coordinate with multiple logistics providers when using air to sea, air to air, and sea to air transport to ensure smooth transitions and avoid delays?
Thanks, Shaminder. As a company, we do engage in quite a bit of sea air cargo from both Bangladesh, southern India, and Pakistan. So, as you correctly said, we market ourselves as a hub. But the truth of the matter is, on every single sea air shipment that arrives in this country, my custom brokerage guys have to go to 16 places in the Colombo port, 16, to get one shipment out. Versus our office in Singapore, the guy does it at his desk and takes a QR code printout and goes to the port. That is what we are competing with, right? Okay. So there's definite room for improvement, and we believe that SLAFA as a body, we are lobbying for more digitization within the industry. So getting back to your question, yes, sea air, air is a growth market in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is looked at as a close alternative to Singapore because of its ocean freight transit time being almost equivalent from Bangladesh to Singapore versus Bangladesh to Colombo. So you do see quite a number of providers doing a lot of sea air cargo via here. But I feel that a lot of the players need to understand that there needs to be automation in terms of understanding shipping data. There's a big drive in using AI in demand planning and understanding your data. I think Sri Lanka is still at its infancy stage in that, and I think some players in Sri Lanka do use it, but most of them, I feel, are scared to use it, which when I hear that, I always tell them, AI won't replace you, but somebody using AI will. So I push people to do a lot of trainings in terms of their staff and also understand AI, because truly it is your friend, right? And the sea air cargo industry in Sri Lanka is here to stay. However, I feel that there is, in terms of the authorities, there's a bit of lack of knowledge in terms of these combined modes. SLAFA as a body has been lobbying for air transfers quite a number of times now with Sri Lanka Customs in order to get it going, to handle it in a much more convenient and easy manner. But I feel there's still room to grow, and we are lobbying, and we're trying to make this the word hub more than just a word, and we are making that effort. Chami.
Thank you, Sujan. I think, yeah, I mean, we all have a role, but our role is much more smaller than the other roles. So Chana, we all know how important is Sri Lanka geopolitically and geographically located. When thinking about logistics, and Sri Lanka has the potential to become a major transit hub connecting the east and the west. As stakeholders in the industry, how can we support it, and what is expected from the government?
In the interest of time, I'll focus on the precise question, Chami. What we found from government are two priorities. I mean, all of us, myself, Sanjay, all of us, apart from our respective associations and companies, we sit at different forums like the Shippers Council, where we sit with our export and import colleagues. One thing we demand is the digitization, right? And the other thing is a bit of a sour topic, compliance. Sour in the sense, I know some of our so-called prominent places are not compliant. Digitization is the priority. If you talk of any hubs, like as Sujan mentioned, I don't think we can even compare with Singapore. Places like Port Klang, Dubai, Hong Kong, wherever, digitization is a must. So we need to push it as an association, as individual. It's something that we have been doing that needs to be done. So we are happy that initiatives like ASI Hub is being looked at. National Single Window, which has been sitting on where it is for about 14 years now. And we see, we have a glimpse of hope as far as the community systems are concerned. At least now airport community, port community systems are being spoken of. But the last meeting I took part actually, was about 1.5 months ago. And that's also in limbo now. So digitization and the compliance aspect of it, right? Yes, we see certain players involved in transshipment activities in Sri Lanka, but if you look at the larger share who are not involved, they are scared to come because of certain way of operations happening. That's again having not been digitized. So digitization will have an answer to all of that. The other point, what I firmly believe is that if you look at any of those hubs, those are not air freight hubs in isolation. They're logistics hubs.
Correct, yeah.
If you look at Dubai, Singapore, Hong Kong, Port Klang, to even Busan, all those are logistics hubs, meaning your port is handling logistics and are focused beyond handling container transshipments. Now we have been struggling and fighting, and we have been lobbying. Even about 10, 15 multi-country consolidators who are operating inside the port, I'm just deviating from the air freight topic to getting into the context, have been operating with a lot of difficulties, right? So we have been asking for facilities to come up, because then only you can harness the potential of an air freight hub. right now we depend on seasonalities in places like Dhaka, maybe to some extent India, those shipments to come to Sri Lanka, then we talk of we handling sea or air. It's not that. When you have consolidations happening and logistics happening inside the port, there are a lot of opportunities for sea to air and like that. So that's how I see it. So from the government side of it, we need that support. I think then the business will flow.
I'm sure that even we have been studying so much about, connecting Hambantota port and the Hambantota airport, that, whether we can do CER, transshipment, but the thing is that, there's so much of regulatory things that to take place that takes long, or maybe sometimes it has been a hindrance that, we can do. So I think it's just even sea to air from Colombo to Hambantota is just 2.5 hours away.
True, with the connectivity happening, it's
Yeah.
to be completed with these port access, road and everything falling into place.
Yeah,
Hambantota becomes much more attractive.
yeah,
And maybe, as Sanjay said, why not a courier hub?
exactly, yeah. Fulfillment centers.
Fulfillment
there's so much
centers.
of
So it's
capacity there.
other thing what is frustrating, just allow me to take a couple of minutes,
Sure.
Shami, is that now we as an association have been talking this, my predecessors also, for the OEDs. What we see is whenever there's a regime change, political regime change, we see the heads being rolled, right? So you talk to somebody and then you get that person. We don't talk to politicos by virtual, we talk to the officials. They get an understanding of what we are demanding, and we see that they are understanding it. Comes an election, he is no more. And we start explaining the same old thing over and over again.
Yeah.
So where do we stop?
Miran, this time over to you. With the comeback of the US new regime, the world expects more sanctions and maybe diverting production areas to different areas than what presently is. So China plus one policy.
Yeah.
How do international trade agreements and sanctions shape the demand of air cargo in the future?
Yeah. Again, Chami, it's a timely question because all eyes are open as to how tariffs are going to affect the industry. Yeah, so trade agreements, yes, it's made to foster economic growth by exchanging goods and services without limitations. So, in turn, there's demand for air freight. But what happens the moment the tariffs or duties are imposed, it breaks the free movement, and then the trading becomes difficult. So like Chami said, I believe 2 days ago, the new US administration announced 25% tariff on all imports coming from Mexico and Canada. At the same time, 10% additional tax on imports from China. So if you look at the impact on air cargo, from a short-term point of view, I believe there can be an uptick in demand because shippers would want to get their stuff out before the tariffs are introduced. So places like China, already China is the demand is so high currently, and this may further increase as a result of taxes are going to come in from January. Then longer term, I would say the manufacturers may shift production from the high tariff countries to low tariff countries. So Sri Lanka has an opportunity there. It could be plants moving out from China into Sri Lanka or even to Cambodia, into Vietnam. That shift is possible. That's a high probability, only time can decide. At the same time, there could be a disadvantage for air freight because of the tariffs, your cost is going up, so the buyers are going to think twice whether am I going to use air freight. So there could be a surge in ocean demand for air freight. There could be a decline. So these are the possibilities, Chami.
All right. So Sanjay, with the evolving drone technology, many industries will change their operational mechanisms in the future. Rules and regulations will have to be updated considering the utilization. How might regulatory changes related to unmanned aerial vehicles that are drones affect the air cargo industry?
Shamil, I don't think drones are going to be an immediate impact on the air cargo industry, let's say in the next 5 years or so. We are looking at a slightly longer projection there. There are a lot of positives that come out of having drone technology, looking at it or investing in it. One being cost. Right? It can significantly bring down cost. It can significantly positively impact your sustainability plans because you can run most of these drones, even to the extent of carrying larger cargo, much more efficiently than traditional cargo moving methods by air. But there are also, in the current climate, there are also some concerns. Like you mentioned, regulation is not right up there in most countries. And then there is also, in the countries that it has been tested predominantly, there have been safety concerns as well. Now, if you take Aramex as a company, we've invested heavily in drone technology, right? We've just partnered up with a very large drone manufacturing company, and we hope to utilize drone technology within the next 5 years in the short haul, right, around the Middle East, simply because testing has been successful. If you've seen corporate video running in the background, you would have seen some of those tests run drone technology, doing deliveries in the Middle East, in different countries. Saying that, there have been tests done in the UK, there have been tests done in places like Singapore, where there have been safety concerns, right? I mean, if you Google delivery by drone, there's a very famous video of a drone trying to deliver a food parcel to a 7th floor apartment, which went horribly wrong. So it's not ready yet, I'd say, in most places. Where it's ready, it makes sense to invest in. So like, for example, the Middle East is very, I'd say, not very, I'd say a mid-level mature market when it comes to drone technology. It's on the ground, it's in the air, so it's been tested, regulations have been set up. In a country like Sri Lanka, we don't have the regulations to manage drone deliveries or drone technology yet. It's very cumbersome to get a drone into the country. You need Defense Ministry approval. There are rules as to how high you can fly it. Generally, you can't fly it above a normal parapet wall of a house. So if the limitations were lifted on a policy level and the environment itself is conducive for drone technology, then it's a good option to go to. But it's not something that everyone can adopt, I would say. There'll be very specific use cases depending on where you are geographically and what your socio-economic situation also is, right? In a developing country, the risks for both the shipper and the receiver are quite high. The package might go missing, your drone also might go missing, right? So I think in the developed world, some markets, yes. Again, in very metropolitan or city areas like New York, I doubt that it could be very useful or safe to use. But in countries like the Middle East, where you have spaces that you can move through, it's mostly desert, you're not going to hit trees and come across random obstacles. It's something that can be used now. With the advancement of AI coming in the next few years, maybe 10 years down the line, you will start seeing more commercial use for drones. But right now, it's more or less a buzzword in most places, I'd say.
Yeah, I agree and disagree with you. The drone technology is actually now, I think, it's being studied now to fertilize the paddy fields. in the northwestern province. So that is something that is coming. But again, getting back to deliveries, there are a lot of minuses that they are thinking. That one is that about the drone is being theft once it lands there, or maybe drop at certain height, that kind of thing. The other thing is that especially close by to the airports. So those are really safety hazards that I mean, even we are as airlines, we are facing the issues with bird strikes near the airports. So I don't think any airline can afford to have a drone strike. So those are the things that I'm sure that the challenges that drone industry is going to take place. But there are a lot of manufacturers that who are doing it, especially in India. So I think in Malaysia also that probably the government level there are discussions on the fertilizing.
I think, Chamin, that's a key thing. You can use it for things like fertilization. There's a lot of usages for it in the agricultural sector. Again, I'll come back to the point of how mature are we socio-economically to be able to handle this technology. One farmer might decide to put something else in the drone and douse another farmer's plot, So these are the things that need to be addressed on the ground before you bring something like this into a country like Sri Lanka. So there are a lot of background things.
Regulation is very
regulation and also education on for the users, the dangers and the usages for it. There's a lot of things in the background that needs to be worked on, I'd say, before we really practically push it on the ground.
Yeah. So before winding up, are there any questions to the panel? We have hardly 5 minutes.
Yes, the lady with her hand up. Would someone give her a mic, if you don't mind?
Apologies for keeping you away from your lunch. I just have one question, that's to Sanjay actually. So you all spoke a lot about today being the Black Friday and a lot of e-commerce happening. And we know a majority of e-commerce is basically fashion and electronic equipment. And in the recent past, what we have noticed is that the Global South has become the dumping ground for all these fast fashion and electronic waste. And do you think that there's an impact from this to e-commerce? Because lately we've seen a lot of campaigns and documentaries focusing on this issue of fast fashion, especially coming from Far East to Europe and to US, and it being dumping grounds for countries like Chile, Ghana, and other African countries. So do you see an impact on this awareness especially among the young generation about the negative impacts of the fast fashion industry? And also as freight forwarders, how are you planning to tackle that? Thank you.
Very interesting question. Unfortunately, I don't work in the UN, so I'm not going to get involved in geopolitics when it comes to the documentaries you've seen, right? But I think the core problem is today is a market of everything is impulsive, right? Your brains are being trained to be impulsive. Your Instagram feeds, your TikTok feeds, your WhatsApp statuses. So people are impulse buying. I wouldn't say that this is a Far East or a Western issue. It's all driven by consumer trends, right? Now, your question, I think, is more related to sustainability, right? So on a sustainability level, like I said before, it's not a one department or one individual or one company issue. Everybody has to work on this collectively. If you take an example of us in Sri Lanka, there's big e-commerce players who operate in Sri Lanka now, international players, right? One of our standards to them has been, or to these players has been that if you are going to operate with us in Sri Lanka, we need to get an assurance and validation of your packages being sustainable, right? Are your packaging material being sustainable? Why? Because when we do a delivery from Colombo to Jaffna, which is hours and miles away, and you end up delivering a small eraser for about 200 and 500 rupees, and what's going to happen to the packaging? You're going to tear it and dump it somewhere. So those are some initiatives that we take, right? If our customer doesn't have sustainable packing, we'll refer them to a party that does sustainable packing with them, right? Or else we might even take the choice of not handling that business. We've done this on the ground. So it's a collective responsibility, right? Everybody in that supply chain and value chain needs to take an individual call of whether we are going to look at profiteering and sustainability together, or you're just going to look at one aspect. Trust me, one on its own doesn't work, right? You cannot be holier than thou and say, you know, I'm going all sustainable. It doesn't work. It's not realistic. The business won't be sustainable. So you have to have a balanced approach to it, and each member on that value chain and supply chain, from governments to operators in the airlines or sea lines to the middle parties like Aramex, need to work towards that singular goal. Everyone needs to play their part. I can't comment on the documentaries you've seen.
So thank you very much. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time. I think we initially thought, you know, we are short of 90 minutes is too long, but, you know, it is absolutely a short of time. So thank you very much.